It was a chilly Friday night, and I found myself home alone indulging in my favorite horror movie. The atmosphere was perfect for a night of scares. Dim lights, a cozy blanket, and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Little did I know, the true horror wasn't confined to the fictional world on my TV screen. As the tension in the movie peaked, I heard a faint whisper behind me. At first I brushed it off thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more distinct. Each time I turned around expecting to catch someone in the act, there was no one there. I decided to pause the movie and investigate. Thinking maybe a family member had come home early, I was greeted by an eerie sight, my own living room displayed on the TV screen. It took me a moment to realize that it was a live feed, and in the corner of the room, there it was, a shadowy figure lurking like a phantom. A shiver ran down my spine as I approached the corner of the room. My eyes still fixed on the television, the whispers continued, forming a chilling message. "You're not alone." The room seemed to grow colder, and an unsettling stillness settled in. I was on the verge of panic, my mind struggling to comprehend the surreal scene unfolding before me. As I reached the spot where the shadow loomed on the TV, the whispers intensified, echoing through the walls. The atmosphere became suffocating, and I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck. I turned back to the TV, only to realize that the shadow was no longer confined to the screen. It was now in the room with me. Fear surged through me, and I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. I desperately searched for my phone to call for help, but the device seemed to malfunction, adding to the nightmare. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows, and I could feel an unseen presence closing in. The whispers transformed into haunting laughter as the lights flickered again and the figure materialized into a dark, indistinct form. It stood before me featureless and foreboding. I could sense its malevolence, an oppressive force that drained the warmth from the room. Unable to move, I watched as the figure extended its shadowy tendrils towards me. The whispers turned into an otherworldly sound, a symphony of terror. Just as the figure closed in, the lights flickered once more, and it vanished, leaving me trembling in the darkness. Gasping for breath, I stumbled towards the front door and flung it open. Escaping into the night, as I stood on the porch, I cast one last glance at the living room. The figure reappeared in the window, staring back at me with unseen eyes. The whispers lingered in the air, promising a presence that would forever haunt the corners of my mind. I had always taken pride in the isolation of my home. Nestled far from the nearest town, it was my sanctuary, a place where I could go be alone with my thoughts, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. So when the knock shattered the silence of a stormy night, it was more than just unexpected. It was an intrusion into my world. I opened the door to find a man drenched from the rain, his car supposedly broken down a little way down the road. He seemed harmless enough, asking if he could use my phone to call for a tow truck. Something in his eyes unnerved me, but I chalked it up to my lack of interaction with strangers and let him in. As he spoke on the phone in the other room, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. His presence in my home felt like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything. When he finished the call and thanked me, I expected him to leave, but he didn't. Instead, he started a conversation commenting on the house, my choice of decor, and then, more alarmingly, on personal photos I had around. The way he spoke about my family, it was as if he knew them, knew me. His comments were too specific, his knowledge too intimate. Fear crept into my heart. This was no stranger. I struggled to place him, his face naggingly familiar, yet out of reach in my memory. As the night wore on, his behavior grew more erratic. He paced the room, looking out the windows frequently, and his sentences were often half-finished, as if he was battling internal thoughts. Then, in a moment of chilling clarity, he mentioned a childhood nickname of mine, one I hadn't heard in years. That's when it hit me. He was from my past, a part of my life I had tried to forget, a childhood friend who had become increasingly troubled as we grew up. He had lost touch after a particularly disturbing incident, and now he was here, in my house, his intentions unclear. The realization sent a wave of terror through me. I was alone, far from any neighbors, with a man whose past was marked by unpredictability and violence. I needed to get him out of my house, but how? Every moment I spent with him felt like a dance on the edge of a knife. One wrong step and everything can go terribly wrong. The storm outside intensified, its howling winds mirroring the chaos unfolding in my living room. The man, once a childhood friend but now a stranger with shadow intentions, began to talk more about our past. His words twisted into tales I didn't recognize, events that never happened, friendships that never existed. There was a manic glint in his eye that sent chills down my spine. I had to get him out, but every time I suggested he leave or made a move toward the phone, he changed. His demeanor shifted from nostalgic to threatening. His voice dropped into a sinister whisper, saying things like, "You wouldn't want to send an old friend out into the storm, would you?" The power flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness. In those brief seconds, I felt a paralyzing fear. When the lights returned, he was closer. Too close. His face mere inches from mine, eyes boring into me with an intensity that spoke of unhinged thoughts and dangerous desires. It was clear he wasn't just here because of a broken down car. He had planned this, had been watching me, waiting for the perfect moment when I was alone. The isolation of my home, once my haven, now felt like a trap. The roads were likely impassable due to the storm, and help was too far away. Desperation took hold, and I excused myself to make tea. Needing a moment to think, to plan in the kitchen, my hands shook as I boiled water. The sound of his heavy footsteps following me, he leaned against the doorway, watching me with a smirk that told me he knew I was frightened, and he enjoyed it. I remembered then, the old hunting knife my father had given me, tucked away in the drawer. My heart pounded as I reached for it, hiding it behind me, but as I turned, he was right there, his hand suddenly gripping mine, stopping me. "What are you afraid of?" he taunted, his breath hot on my face. "We're just two old friends catching up." The situation escalated when he tried to drag me back to the living room. I struggled, my mind racing. In a desperate move, I managed to break free and run, but the house was unfamiliar in the dark. The storm having knocked out the power completely now. I could hear him laughing, a sound that echoed through the dark corridors, a predator playing with his prey. I hid, trying to silence my breathing, as I heard him moving through the house, calling out my name in a sing-song voice, reminiscing about childhood memories that were now tainted with terror. Then a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate. The storm, as if seeing my plight, intensified, and a bolt of lightning struck nearby, causing him to scream in surprise. I used the moment to make a run for it, heading towards the back door. But he was quick. Filled by madness, he caught up to me. Grabbing my arm, we struggled. The knife I had grabbed earlier now between us, it was him or me, and in that moment I knew I had to survive. The fight was brutal and terrifying, but somehow I managed to turn the knife on him. He collapsed, a look of disbelief on his face, and then stillness. I stood there panting, the realization of what I had done hitting me like a physical blow. When the police finally arrived, they found me in a state of shock, the storm having passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. They said I was lucky to be alive, that he had been wanted for many crimes. Most of those crimes were violent crimes. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene, a place of nightmares. I couldn't stay there anymore. The walls echoing with the horrors of that night. I left seeking a new beginning, but the memories of that night of the unwanted guests lingered, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are those that wear a familiar face. It all started on a quiet Tuesday night. I was home alone as usual, the monotony of my routine only broken by an occasional TV show or book. That's when my phone rang for the first time. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Thinking it might be a telemarketer, I ignored it, but the caller was persistent. The phone rang again and again until, driven by a mix of curiosity and irritation, I answered. Silence, not a sound from the other end. I repeated my hello a few times before hanging up, shrugging it off as a wrong number, but the calls didn't stop. Every night, like clockwork, the phone would ring. The same unknown number, and every time I answered, there was nothing but an unsettling silence. It was as if someone was there, listening, breathing. I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't just a wrong number or a broken connection. Someone was deliberately calling me, listening to my voice and saying nothing. I tried blocking the number, but then the call started coming from a different one. I even changed my number, but somehow they found it again. Then one night, everything changed. The phone rang, and amidst the usual silence, I heard a whisper. "Look outside." My heart skipped a beat. I was alone, the nearest neighbor a good distance away, and the streets barely punctured the night's darkness. Against my better judgment, I crept to the window and peered out. There, under the dim glow of the streetlight, stood a figure, just staring up at my window. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his gaze, cold and unrelenting. I was scared now, truly scared. I called the police, but they found no one when they arrived. The figure had vanished, leaving me to question if I had imagined it all. But the note I found on my door the next evening confirmed my worst fears, scrawled in a hurried hand with the words, "You can't escape me." The calls continued, now with the occasional whispers that sent shivers down my spine. "You're not alone anymore," he would say, or, "I'm watching you." I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I installed new locks, a security system, but nothing seemed to deter my unseen tormentor. I realized I had to face this head on. One night I waited in the darkness, the phone by my side. When it rang, I answered with a newfound resolve. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. There was a pause, and then a cold, mocking laughter echoed from the other end. "To see you scared," he replied. Fear turned to anger. I wasn't going to let this person terrorize me any longer. "I'm not afraid of you," I declared, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You will be," he said, and the line went dead. Hours later, as the first light of dawn crept through my curtains, I heard it, a faint scratching at the door. My heart raced. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. I grabbed the baseball bat I had started keeping by my bed and approached the door. With every step, my fear grew, but so did my anger. I was done being the victim. I flung the door open, ready to confront my tormentor. But there was no one there, just the cold early morning air and a sense of eerie silence. As I stood there, bat in hand, I realized this was far from over. Whoever was doing this was playing the game, and I was the unwilling participant. I didn't know when this nightmare would end, but I knew one thing. I had to be ready for whatever came next.